Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and I just want to remind you all that if you are an avid listener of the show, please subscribe to us on YouTube, share this video around, and like the content if you do indeed like it. We would really appreciate that. We've got ambitious goals for growth this year, and we'd love to spread our tentacles of influence far and wide across the South African landscape. Helping me to do that today, I'm joined once again by Sara. Sara, thank you for coming on again today, 2 days in a row.
No, it's my pleasure. I think if the X-rated discussion we had before we came on were part of this show, our reach would be much, much greater.
Yeah, clearly we have to do the Daily Friend after dark. I've been saying this for a while, but anyway, I must join today by Marius Roodt. Marius, how are you?
How's it, guys?
Right, so let's get stuck into things that happened in December after the show went off air. And we are going to be talking about the Ditsobotla municipality in Northwest, where I believe just after the show stopped for December, there was a series of by-elections held. Now, not just a little group of by-elections, but an entire municipality had to be re-elected because of ANC infighting, which was really, really bad in the municipality, to the extent that there were 2 mayors elected and 2 speakers elected, and the ANC was basically holding 2 separate legislatures in the city at the same time, refusing to acknowledge the other one. This, of course, could not stand, and so the council had to be dissolved, and the entire thing re-elected. That happened in December, and we got some very interesting results. So previously, the ANC got about 50% of the vote in that municipality, with 21 seats in total. They shrunk to about, I think, 38% of the vote and 16 seats. Most of that came at the expense, or most of their losses were to the EFF, who grew to 10 seats, up from 6 in the municipality. The DA stayed pretty much where it was. I think it got 1% more of the vote, but it didn't equate to more seats, with about 6. And then there were a couple of other smaller parties who managed to break in to the council. And so, as a result, the ANC went from holding a healthy majority in the council, even if they couldn't agree on which faction of theirs was going to control it, to a very distorted, complex, multi-party council where deals had to be made. Marius, let's start with you. What were your takeaways from this by-election before we get into the results of it, the political consequences of it? What were your thoughts on the results? Who did badly? Who did well? What do you think?
Yeah, I think you've got it exactly spot on there. I mean, it was a really bad bloody nose for the ANC. This was a municipality that was getting 70% of the vote 2 or 3 elections ago. Now it's getting barely 40% of the vote. And that's a kind of trend we've seen in a lot of places around South Africa, especially in metros, places like Joburg and Tshwane and so on, and Ditsobotla, where the ANC's gone from being a 60-65% party to being a 30% party in the space of about 2 elections. So I think it's quite significant that it's happening in like kind of a rural area where the ANC is always a little bit stronger. That said, the Northwest is obviously a place where the EFF generally does pretty well. And that's what I
believe the EFF won its first ever ward election in the country in Northwest, somewhere near Marikana.
Not this election, but like previously, yeah. So
back when they first put up council candidates.
So I mean, also these are the 3 kind of strongholds for the EFF. The way I see it is Northwest, because the mining issues there, Gauteng, especially amongst the black middle class professionals, and in Limpopo, with a lot of petty people. And Julius Malema himself is obviously a petty, so I think you get some ethnic support there. But overall, I think it was a very bad election for the ANC. It was also interesting it came out. It was held just after the ANC conference, so I don't think it was good news for anybody in the party there. But and also what is interesting is how the Freedom Front Plus they actually lost a seat, I think, as you mentioned, and the DA actually went up a little bit. So maybe it looks like the DA is kind of stopped the hemorrhaging of votes to its right amongst especially white Afrikaners. But it remains to be seen. But I think this is the kind of thing we're going to be seeing. It's going to become more and more common, and I think people must get used to the ANC not having a majority. The ANC is going to be the biggest party in South Africa for a long time to come, but it's not going to be a party that gets above 50% But in a lot of places anymore, I don't think.
So, Sara, I want your thoughts on what resulted from this by-election, which was a somewhat odd coalition. It looked for a time as though the ANC and EFF might go into coalition, but as we've seen in a number of municipalities now, that proves to be more difficult than many people thought. After all, the ANC and EFF are very ideologically aligned, and of course, the EFF was essentially the ANC Youth League, and yet they've struggled to form coalitions in a number of municipalities now. In Ekurhuleni, the ANC and EFF together voted out the DA mayor, only to disagree about who was going to be the candidate for mayor to replace the DA. And so the EFF ended up basically allowing the DA mayor to get back in. And we're seeing some interesting things here in this municipality as well, where the ANC decided to not even try to form a coalition with the EFF and instead cobbled together a group of smaller parties. They took their 16 seats, there's 39 in the council overall, and they joined together with the Forum for Service Delivery, the Patriotic Alliance, and the African Heart Congress to form a 21-seat majority. But upon winning the election with this coalition, the mayor, who was from the Patriotic Alliance, who is a former ANC mayor, who was essentially, I think, kind of pushed to the side because she was found guilty of misappropriating funds, had to resign after some complaints by the EFF caused the Patriotic Alliance to essentially pressure her into resigning. Very weird circumstance, and they're going to have to elect a new mayor in this municipality. What do you make of this whole mess?
Oh, it's another day in South Africa. I mean, it's Tuesday, isn't it? You see, this is part of the problem. First of all, part of the problem when your sort of consensus candidate is dodgy and from a party that was previously the ANC, isn't the ANC anymore, but etc. etc. But it also speaks to I think this might be part of what the EFF is sort of calculating, is that this sort of grubby little thing will happen. And it's not so much showing the populace that it can manage better, because it doesn't manage anything. It seems to deliberately avoid managing anything. So it can't sully its own reputation. But it's almost like if we can show that other people are managing badly, that by proxy will somehow reflect well on us. I can only assume it's something like that. And as far as I know, and this is where the mayor got into trouble, there was a proposal from the ANC that the municipal manager, I think, become the speaker as well. And I think that was the position. And, obviously that's not exactly kosher. The proposal wasn't properly placed on the agenda. Surprise, surprise. And I think you're right. I think the PA said, we can't have our mayor supporting this sort of rubbish. And she within hours of becoming the mayor, she unbecame the mayor, and she's no longer the mayor anymore. And it already very quickly plays into, I think, I can only assume the game that the EFF is, because they're not wrong. The EFF appears to be on the side of right in this regard, but it's almost like sitting and just waiting for the moment when they can burnish their credentials by burning the other side. And of course, the tragedy for the larger municipality is that it with 2 mayors, 2 speakers, and 2 everything else's, service delivery, as Helen Zille observed, had gone to absolute pot. I mean, beyond pot. And it's not going to get better anytime soon. And now it's really not going to get better anytime soon. But I think one of the points we were discussing earlier is the very fact that it is, although it's a large municipality, it is a rural municipality. And the EFF strength lies in the fact that I think it was seen as the supportive party when Marikana was the big issue that it was. The EFF came in as the supporters of the families and all those who'd suffered as a result of the massacre at Marikana, and that's where it burnished its own credentials in the area. So, quite what I don't say it's deliberate, but it's funny how the EFF is never at the head of the governance of anything. It's at best a coalition party, which can uncoalesce, which it does, from the ANC, as you described in Ekurhuleni. So I think there's some areas that are just going to be, however bad South Africa is in general, are going to be absolutely dogged by bad politics and I think the general sort of disarray that afflicts the worst of South African party politics.
So, Marius, I wrote an opinion piece in November of last year asking whether an EFF-ANC coalition can actually work. And my argument was something along these lines, that both of them are parties of patronage, and that however close they may be ideologically, they recognize each other not as kindred spirits, but as competitors for the same territory. Is that when the EFF and the ANC often can't agree together because they don't know how to divide up the patronage between the two of them. And that the ANC in such a circumstance might prefer to either go in with smaller parties if it can, because it's easier to manage the patronage networks when your partners are, not as cunning as the EFF, or alternatively, even let the opposition run because the ANC can continue to keep its patronage networks going, even though there's a weak opposition coalition in charge. What do you make of that argument? What do you make of the prospect for an EFF-ANC coalition in 2024?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I know a lot of people are worried about an ANC-EFF coalition possibly at national level after 2024. I am as well, but I don't think it's a very likely thing to happen. I think you're right about the patronage networks, and I think there's also, I think a lot of people in the EFF, perhaps not necessarily people like Julius Malema and Floyd Shivambu, don't want to keep the ANC in power. They want to, they know that party's time's up and they need to get rid of it, and going to coalition with it will keep it alive. But I think somebody like Julius Malema knows that the only way he could ever become president of South Africa is through piggybacking on the ANC. But being in the EFF by himself, the EFF is never going to be a 50% plus one party in South Africa. It will probably never be the single biggest party in South Africa either. And it's probably reached its ceiling more or less, I think, in the country. So I think that's exactly it. And perhaps also, a lot of this fighting between the EFF and the ANC is because they're so similar. There's always that saying, people don't get on with people who are very like themselves. So I think that's probably part of it. But I think it's also been interesting what the Patriotic Alliance has been doing. It's obviously gone into coalition now with the ANC in Ditsobotla, and the municipality next door, JB Marks, where Potchefstroom is. The PAs helped keep the ANC in power there, where the ANC lost out a majority in the 2021 local government election. So I think, probably after 2024, if the ANC misses out on a majority, which I think it'll probably be more likely, if it wants to stay in power, it'll go into coalition with small parties like the Patriotic Alliance, like Al Jamaa, National Freedom Party, if it makes it back. Good will probably be an option. But I can't remember who said it, but Good is not good. That's for this. The PA is a very transactional party. It's supported the DA in Joburg in coalition there, but it's also supported the ANC in coalitions in the Karoo. It's obviously supporting the ANC now in Ditsobotla and in JB Marks. So it's obviously a place that's it's a transactional party, and it'll it's not really ideologically driven. I think it'll do whatever. It'll say, we want this and we'll keep you in power if you give it to us.
Yeah, I wonder how long this is going to last anyway, because the PA also has a habit of, as you say, as part of that transactionality of switching sides in the middle of a coalition. It's done it to both the ANC and the DA at various points. Sara, any final thoughts before we move on?
No, I think I agree. I agree entirely with Marius. I think, as I say, I think the PA is transactional. I think it really doesn't care what anybody thinks about it. It'll go where it can make a difference or not. Go somewhere else because it can't make it. Whatever it may be, it's not a principal party one can rely on. I just think that one of the issues that all the opposition parties need to think about is how they're going to deal with, if they govern, where they govern, is how they deal with a recalcitrant civil service. That's our real problem, but that's for another discussion.
Right. So speaking of coalitions, there's been, I guess we can call them the Wild Dogs Coalition. There has been a bit of a setback for them in the city of Tshwane, where a very adverse finding by the Auditor General, which says that the city of Tshwane did not basically do its accounting correctly, was leaked to the media. However, the leak has been confirmed by the Mayor, Randall Williams, as correct. And the multi-party coalition there, the Wild Dogs, includes the DA, Action SA, the Freedom Front Plus, and I think COPE, as well as the ACDP as well, are scrambling to try and fix the fallout from this adverse report. It's pretty bad for a big municipality like this to get this adverse report. I think it may even be the first one that Tshwane has gotten. I'm not sure if ever, but certainly in a while. Various stats that there was 800 million was not properly accounted for leave payments. There was unauthorized expenditure understated by 646 million rand. So pretty bad stuff. The coalition spokesperson Corne Mulder from the Freedom Front Plus said, our efforts to displace the failed ANC can never see regression in the standard of good governance. He went on to say that there was going to be a meeting at the national level between all of the partners of this multi-party coalition to think about what remedial action needs to be taken to solve this problem. However, he did claim that the government took over the city's reins 5 months after the financial year had started, for which this adverse finding happened. He then went on to say, the governing multi-party coalition in Tshwane will respond to the Audit's general report decisively with remedial action, consequence management, and transparency. Well, those sound like good words, but this is quite important because, Marius, let me start with you. You were saying that this is a very big deal for the alternative to the ANC. What do you make of this story?
Yeah, I think this is, if it does come out that it was this bad audit opinion, I think it's quite a big issue for the DA in particular, and the Wild Dogs in general. One of the, if you want to call it, competitive advantages, or why what these parties say why they should vote for them rather than the ANC, is because they're not going to steal your money. They're going to make sure taxpayers' money is spent properly. They're going to keep track of it, and this is quite a big deal. This isn't to paraphrase Jacob Zuma when he said it's not some road in Malawi. This isn't some municipality in Limpopo or something. It's a proper big municipality. It's probably the fourth or fifth biggest municipality in the country, and it's got a huge budget. So I'm not sure exactly what will be in the billions. So it's obviously a slight problem that this has happened, and I think it's something that the ANC can definitely make hay about. In opposition, and another to what they could use when we do start talking about the general election and the campaign starts. So look, well, even the DA isn't running things properly. So give us another chance. So it's I think it's a big problem for the DA, and hopefully it's not something that's going to become common, but it's something that needs to be dealt with quickly, I think, and it's something that definitely needs to be watched.
So Sara, what's interesting is that a joint statement came out of the political parties here, the DA, Action SA, Freedom Front Plus, IFP, ACDP, and COPE, who all issued a statement together saying essentially what Corne Mulder said about this. And I think that's quite interesting because it shows that that despite all of the friction between the party members in this multi-party coalition, when a real crisis hits the government that threatens to damage all of them, they're not blaming each other, at least not so far. And they seem to be sticking together. What do you make of this story?
I think it's very politic because of the fact that 5 months were not under coalition rule. So there is obviously distinct possibility, once all the facts are gone into, that some or a bit of that period of poor governance fell within the ANC's period of government. So it's one of those things where I think there's a lot to be said for all of them standing together and putting out the statement that says this is not acceptable. We won't tolerate it. We're investigated and we'll report. At least that is the correct approach. In other words, acknowledge that you may be responsible for it. You'll do everything to make sure it's resolved. Once the facts are out, it may be more complex, different, but it's also, as I say, for that reason of 5 months, the ANC may be culpable as well. So it's got to be very careful, I think, at this stage, to say anything against the coalition in case they are discovered to be as much, if not more, of the problem than the coalition itself. And obviously, it is the effect that Tshwane has been seen as it's the one, despite the size, the relatively stable coalition that's been in charge. While it's been in charge, it's had to fight the province. Tshwane had to fight the province with regard to winding up the council because of ANC politicking. But it has the advantage that neither Kuruleni nor Joburg has, in that it is together they are a majority. The ANC is in opposition the ANC and the EFF are in opposition in that regard.
As our colleague Gabriel Krauser said, the road to the union buildings in 2024 lies through Pretoria.
From his lips to God's ears, as they say. With that in mind, I mean, the conspiracy theorists to me suggest that maybe, this has been brought up and leaked as it has, when it has, 18 months to go. We're in the season of working towards the next election and, making other people appear not as good as they said they were, and all bets are off. So I think the detail of this issue is very important. Who was involved? Is anyone particularly responsible for it, etc.? But to start off by saying, look, we acknowledge this has happened. It isn't good. We'll do what we can. We promise. I think it's the only way to go, and I think they've
Right.
gone about it well.
No, good start. But if they really want to get to the bottom of this, they need to probably produce some kind of scalp at the end of the thing, and someone who is clearly not a scapegoat, but an actual guilty party here. Yeah, a real scalp, not a false one. Marius, any final thoughts before we move on?
No, but just to agree that I think they probably have handled this in the correct way now. And I think it's interesting, as you say, there's no finger pointing in the coalition or the Wild Dogs. They seem to be presenting united front, which probably is the right way to go about this. But probably the best way to avoid these crises is to make sure that all your accounting systems are in place and done properly. But just reading about this, it does seem that things were done. It seems to be the bad audits result is also on some technicalities. It's not really because a whole bunch of money is getting stolen and whatever you. So I'm not an auditor.
Right. This is the reality of audits, is they do give you an indication of where corruption might be, but they don't prove it by themselves, because it's basically just you didn't do your accounting correctly, which is bad.
You still want accounting to be done properly by the Wild Dog Party. It's not
exactly.
Excuse, so.
No, 100%, because the moment you get sloppy with your bookkeeping, it's very quick. There's a very short road from that to everything falling apart.
And as I said, I think also the DA and the other Wild Dog parties have much less rope than the ANC to make mistakes and so on. So
right.
I think they need
that's definitely true. They are held to different standards, and that's probably actually a good thing, because it means that they perform. That's one of the reasons they perform better in general. All right, but let us go on to our next story. And this is from Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi, who was formerly the MEC for Education in Gauteng, who seems to have reiterated calls he's made in the past for an end to the Independent Board of Examinations, which is basically the version of the matric exams that the independent schools write, the private schools write. Saying that South Africa doesn't need two systems, and it needs a single body and a single standard that everyone can go to, that the Minister of Education, basic education, should be the final word when it comes to education, although I'm not sure how they aren't already, but anyway. And this really does seem to be, at least to my mind, a little bit of a bash on private schools existing at all, because Panyaza Lesufi is not particularly pleased with them. But also, fine, if you want to have one standard, let's have the IEB standard rather than the government one, which seems to ever be attempting to massage, in my opinion, the numbers so that more and more people are pushed through the system without actually being educated. Sara, what do you make of this?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, Panyaza Lesufi, it's been one of the bones he's been crushing for the last while in the education system. Obviously now he's not responsible for the education system directly, but he's always been a combative force, and he's always been way too visible in disputes, issues like racism and bullying. He's removed the authority from the schools that are responsible for this. But I think this has both a personal and an ideological thing for him to get rid of, because if you have one system, I mean, why would anyone who's paying a lot of money for private schooling, which is based on a different system of matriculation, why should they be forced to pay for the same? They've got to have more control over the schooling that they're paying for. So my question, other than the fact that it might be ideological and a whole lot of other things, is why does there have to be one system? Other than having control over it and being able to, march to socialism under the banner of one education system, all learning the same and turning out bad results. Other than that, Why shouldn't you have different systems? I'm not sure I've heard yet an argument for why it's detrimental one way or the other. I mean,
the argument often seems to be made kind of by implication, right? It's kind of like sort of implying that there might be something fishy going on with these evil private schools, but it's never made direct.
I think it's a pure power grab, and I think there is an ideological element that says there should be no difference. I mean, why in the circumstances of not having generally run education properly over the last couple of decades, why would they want to take on more hassles? And let's be honest, a lot of the bigwigs in politics in South Africa have their children at private schools, and I don't see any of them being any too keen to have the IB matriculation standard removed. And some of the schools provide for matriculation that would allow them acceptance at certainly at British universities. They make provision for qualifying for that as well. So yes, sure, it's elitist. I mean, let's be honest. But I mean, since when do good socialists not like elitism when it favors the rich socialists?
Indeed. Marius, what's your view on this?
I just think there's a quote here from Panyaza Lesufi about this whole thing, saying, we have also seen that small assessment bodies such as IB and SACAI received favorable decisions in 2020 compared to the Department of Basic Education. We'll again thoroughly compare these side by side once they become available. Maybe they're getting favorable decisions because they're doing a better job than the DBE. I don't know, maybe that's why. So, but I think this is all part of the ANC centralizing instinct. I mean, same as things like NHR, same as well, they don't want to break up ESCOM, for example. Everything must be run from the union buildings or whatever it is. Or from the Tuli house, actually. There's no, everything must be under control of the party. So, and I think as the ANC loses control, whether electorally or, whatever the case is, this instinct becomes even more centralizing. But I mean, Panyaza Lesufi he's always going for sideshows. He's, every second first statement from him is complaining about Orania, which is, it's a completely different province, 1,000 kilometers from Gauteng. And it's 2,000 people in the middle of the desert, not bothering anybody. So just let them get on with it. So, but then he's quite a schizophrenic character. I know after this terrible disaster in Boksburg with the fuel truck that exploded and 30 people died, he went to Ekurhuleni and he praised the Ekurhuleni administration for doing the right thing. And as we all know, that's a DA-run municipality at the moment. So, maybe there is actually some pragmatism under all his bluster, but it remains to be seen there.
So I think that demonstrates what I think all of us have agreed about Panyaza Lesufi, which is that he is a more talented politician than most in the ANC, is that he's actually able to kind of see more than 5 minutes into the future and make political decisions on that. And I think that exactly is a great example of it. Politicians praise their opposition very rarely, and usually it's only for longer-term political gain, which is to get the reputation of being fair-minded. And
what I found funny about that praise, it was perhaps an unexpected moment of truth, was he said, it was quite an experience to work with people who were doing it because they wanted to serve the citizens who put them into office, as opposed to the ones who don't serve the citizens who put them into office. So yeah, I just, as I say, I mean, can you imagine, all those cabinet ministers and MPs and high up people in education departments who have their children at these schools thinking, what is he talking about? What is he going to do?
There's lots of double think with these kinds of people. I mean, just to look at Diane Abbott in the UK, she said they must get rid of private schools and comprehensive schools in the UK. And it came out that she was sending her kids to these selective schools, but she's in the same breath saying we must get rid of them. So I think a lot of these people say we need to get rid of them, even while they are sending their kids to private schools.
And the irony of all this is the IB is still relatively close to the way the government wants to run education, right? Its standards are not like wildly different. And that if you got rid of the IB, sure, you would probably be able to crush some private schools, which would then go onto the government curriculum. But a lot of them would then go on to like the British curriculum, for example. You'd have even less control over the way that people were educated. So even from the ANC's perspective, this is counterproductive.
The other possibility, of course, is they would live with the matric system, the current system, and just all the people, you'd have this considerable move, a sort of crush at the top of the results coming from private schools.
Exactly.
So, you wouldn't achieve things anyway.
And for those who say that we just whine, remember, school vouchers are out there, which is the complete opposite of degrading the private system, and instead giving the power back to parents to choose the schools and curriculums that their kids learn, which will equip them best for life. But anyway, you're out of time. Thank you very much for listening. We hope that you found the show interesting. Please share us around, like us, subscribe to us, give us high ratings on Spotify or iTunes or whatever. And we'll see you tomorrow on the Daily Print Show. Cheers, everyone.